Right, that's it for now. More in an hour.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. For great value home insurance, go online to theaa.ie.
Further showers or longer spells of rain tonight. Moderate to fresh northerly winds developing overnight. Lows of 10 to 12 degrees. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
This is News Talk.
All right, it is Thursdays Off the Ball. Nathan with you until 10 o'clock this evening, and we've got a lot to get through over the next 3 hours. John Giles with us as always from 7:30. He'll go through the Champions League finalist thoughts as well ahead of Stephen Kenny's first two games in charge of the Republic of Ireland, and also his thoughts on some of the big transfer deals going down at the moment. On the football show, we'll talk to the Brighton manager, Graham Potter. He has a trio of Irish stars at the club at the moment in Shane Duffy, Aaron Connolly and Jason Lumby. We'll talk about them as well as much more besides around Brighton ahead of the start of the new season. And Tom English will join us. A bad night for Celtic, knocked out of the Champions League in the qualifiers last night, so we'll reflect on that. That's all on the football show from 9 o'clock. Brian O'Driscoll with us live after 8. If you have any questions for Brian, he's going to be reflecting on rugby's return and also looking ahead to another busy weekend at the Aviva Stadium. Richie will run us down through all the day's headlines because there's a lot of live sport as well going on at the moment. But first, really, there's only one place to start because it's been a remarkable 24 hours in American sports. It was around about this time last night that the Milwaukee Bucks decided that they weren't going to take to the floor for their playoff game against the Orlando Magic. This, of course, the Milwaukee Bucks from Wisconsin, a state rocked in recent days by the shooting by police officers of an unarmed black man, Jacob Blake. That has led to a massive outcry. It has led to a huge amount of reaction within sport, led by the Bucks. The Magic followed suit, and then eventually all three of last night's playoff games were called off. I'm joined by Jay Busbee, senior sports writer at Yahoo Sports. Evening, Jay.
How are you? Thanks for having me on.
It has been a crazy 24 hours for American sports, with all sorts of sports following the NBA club's leads and deciding to boycott games. And it raised the question as to when these sports would resume. Firstly, just to get into that before we get into the deeper issues here, there has been some breaking news around the NBA in the past hour or so.
Right. The NBA is going to resume playoffs. We don't know exactly when yet, but there were apparently a lot of emotions, as you would expect, a lot of conflicting feelings, and a lot of concern that on the players' part that the owners weren't holding up their share of this push for racial justice. This was part of the reason why they agreed to come to the bubble in the first place in Orlando, Florida, home of Disney World. The part of the reason why they agreed to be apart from their families for months was they believed they would have the opportunity to get their voices heard on these social justice issues, and they feel to this point that they hadn't been able to. So I think that was the sticking point, but it seems like they realized that continuing to play will give them the platform that they're looking for to get their message out.
This time 24 hours ago, when the Bucks were making that decision to boycott the game, and then eventually not just their playoff, but also Thunder against Rockets, Blazers against Lakers, all three of those games were postponed. From inside that bubble, was that a unanimous decision among the players?
It apparently was not. Apparently, the sticking point was that the Bucks went ahead and they made their decision to what's been called a boycott. It's really more of a strike or a walkout, but they made their decision not to play, and that put immense pressure on the other four teams, the other five teams, if you include the Magic, not to play and to agree with that. And there was a little bit of a sense, from what I have heard and from what our sources have heard, that some of the players felt taken aback, that they weren't quite all on board with this. Not that they necessarily disagreed, but they were surprised that it happened so quickly. But it seems like whatever rough feelings there might have been smoothed over, and everyone seems on the same page now.
Because it certainly did seem as well earlier today that there wasn't any consensus either about resuming the season. Right. That a couple of those franchises thought, we're done, and we are going to stick to this, and we are going to make our point. So who are the influential figures in managing to bring them all together, that the NBA season is now going to resume and that they feel that they can make their protest on the court?
Well, it starts and ends with LeBron James. I mean, this guy is not only one of the most talented basketball players of all time, but he's one of the most respected. He's made it very much his mission to be more than a basketball player, to be more than just a guy who shuts up and dribbles, to quote the insult that was lobbed his way a few years ago. He's made all kinds of initiatives on social justice fronts. He's founded schools. He's looked to get more vote out for the U.S. presidential election this fall. He is the driving force, and I think the fact that he was taken a little bit aback, that he was one of the people that had wanted to actually end the playoffs last night. But I think that as he himself has apparently said, he's cooled down a little bit. He's focused a little bit more on working forward in the playoffs than necessarily focused on pulling out of the playoffs, pulling his team, the Los Angeles Lakers, out of the playoffs. But he's the key force. Anywhere that LeBron goes, the rest of the NBA tends to follow.
I'll be honest, when the news started to break last night, I wasn't maybe quite aware as to how seismic a decision this was, but watching the coverage on American television, everybody clear that this was a landmark moment in the NBA, this stance that the players were taking, that it was up there with 1991 and Magic Johnson and talking about being HIV positive, that this was a day that would live long in the NBA's history. How seismic an event was it in terms of American life, and how has it been reacted to within America over the past 24 hours?
Yeah, it's a fascinating cut. It's so recent that it's almost like one of yet another lightning strikes that we've had this summer. I think it's going to take a while for us to recognize it. It's also going to depend on how much comes from over the next few days, weeks, and months. But you're absolutely right. This was of seismic significance. Very, very few American sports teams will take the stance to the point that they will walk off the field. It's almost never happened. And for it to happen, not just in one sport, but across multiple sports, soccer, baseball, football, but we call it soccer, obviously, baseball, and so forth. They all walked off the field, walked off the court in solidarity. And that was incredibly empowering to the entire movement to have it happen across so many different sports.
It always feels as though it is basketball that takes the lead, particularly in recent years, within the Black Lives Matter movement. You touch on LeBron James and his importance. Adam Silver's importance within that as well. How big a figure has he been, the NBA commissioner, in terms of, firstly, I guess, smoothing things over so that they do go back and they play, but also empowering the players to feel as though they're allowed to have a voice within a sporting organisation that, compared to other sporting organisations, not just in America but around the world, by and large have wanted their athletes and their superstars to stay as far away from possible of any political movement?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Adam Silver has been a driving force in encouraging the players to step up and getting the NBA name out there. He recognizes that these NBA players become more relatable the more human that they are, the more they become bigger stars, the more that we start to see them as not all that dissimilar to us. Obviously, they can do things and they can cash checks that we can't do and we can't cash, but beyond that, they have the same hopes and dreams and fears as the rest of us. And what Adam Silver has done is help these players be humanized and express their points of view. And he has trusted them to make the right choices. And so far, the NBA has positioned itself as a very progressive league, but it has not upset the majority of its fans with the way that it's handled these sorts of social situations. They are comfortable with this intersection of sports and politics in a way that a lot of other sports in America are not.
And are their sponsors and the business side of it, are they comfortable with that mix of sport and politics? Or is it the case, again, when you have a figure of the caliber of LeBron James, arguably the biggest sports star in America, that if he makes this stance, actually there's not much business can do about it? They just have to row in behind it.
I think that's a correct assessment. They recognize, I mean, obviously business likes to keep things as unemotional as possible and likes to appeal to as broad of a network as possible, but they also recognize that if they're going to have a player like LeBron James representing their merchandise, representing their brand, they're going to have to get on board with what LeBron says and what LeBron believes. And he's made it clear that social justice is a part of his brand going forward.
I know it's only in the last hour or so that this has been confirmed, but what happens next in terms of the NBA players? And it's not just the players, because obviously LeBron James has been to the fore, but a couple of nights ago, the LA Clippers coach, Doc Rivers, a lot of people have seen this online, I'm sure. He's the son of a police officer, choking back the tears, saying, we keep loving this country and this country does not love us back. A really affecting piece of television that certainly in this part of the world seems to have brought a lot of attention to this. In terms of getting wanting to get the message out that they want to get out, but also playing basketball. Have you any idea how that happens?
Well, LeBron James, basically after every single game that he plays, he will have a small seminar on social justice, basically at his locker. I mean, there is always, as you are well aware, in America, there is always something new to discuss about this same story. And so a reporter will ask him a question. Sometimes a reporter doesn't even need to ask him. He'll have an opening statement. But literally every single night, he will speak up about the topic of the day, and he will speak eloquently and thoughtfully and with obvious research and awareness and education that he's put into it. So he is putting it forward that way. He's got a platform every night that gets broadcast to the millions of American basketball and sports fans. And I think that what you saw with Doc Rivers, that was powerful as well. I think that the more that we see these players and coaches speak from the heart about their own personal experiences, it becomes less about slogans and more about personal stories.
Is it having any sort of effect? Is it having any sort of effect on lawmakers around America?
Well, it's tough to say at this point. It's such a slow-moving process to get anything forward in America, but they are taking action. I mean, my fear and my belief is that pretty much everyone in America has their opinion hardwired now on all of these social issues. They're either going to listen or they're not. They're either going to care or they're not. It doesn't matter how much they see. If they don't care, they're not going to change their mind. But the issue is whether they can change the minds of lawmakers, and that certainly is possible. That's what the Bucks were trying to do. They were reaching out to Wisconsin state lawmakers, and by all indications, they were making some progress.
Where does this end from an NBA point of view? Because Jacob Blake is just the latest, sadly and shockingly, in the long line of police brutality. And with the way America is going, it's only a matter of time before there's another case like this.
Right.
So is there still a very viable scenario that actually this NBA season, even though it is coming to an end, doesn't get to an end, that the players feel, again, that this is a temporary measure, they're going back, but they're just going to wait and see what happens?
Yeah, I think we're going to need to hear more from the players exactly on their mindset and their rationale for going back, but until we get to that point. But I think it would not at all be out of the question to expect the players that if something does crop up this weekend, for example, if something gets caught on a cell phone, for them to say, that's it, we're done, enough. We're going to focus on social justice. We're not going to just sit here and be your entertainment any longer. They've shown that they're willing to do this. This is a huge step. This is an unthinkable until now step in American sports, and they went ahead and did it. So now that barrier has been crossed, I could very easily see it being crossed again.
They went ahead and did it, and then others followed as well, because you have postponements in the WNBA, Major League Baseball. There were withdrawals from tennis tournaments, the MLS as well. So we were facing a complete breakdown in American sport. The one sport that yet again seemed completely oblivious to all this was golf. And we spoke about this earlier on our golf podcast, that the PGA Tour somehow, they released a statement, but Tiger Woods will play this evening. All the players will play. They appear to be completely tone deaf to what is going on in the rest of American sport. How are they so tone deaf?
As someone who has covered many a golf tournament, I can tell you that golf is played on courses that are not only physically separated from the outside world, but socially and spiritually as well. I mean, they cater to the demographic of America that is much less concerned with these sorts of issues.
The question we had today, are we being too soft on those golfers on the PGA Tour? Because, okay, there is a class divide there. There's no question about that. But this has gone far past any sort of class divide. Like, this is everybody within every other major sport feeling that they need to take some sort of a stand, except golf.
Yeah, the PGA Tour, you probably saw, did release a pretty toothless statement. I agree. I think so. I think at this point, we have reached a point in American society, in American sports history, where everyone who is in the public eye ought to be held accountable, ought to stand up and say what they believe, and if they don't necessarily believe, or if they don't know enough, then they ought to educate themselves, because this is something that does affect all of us across the board, no matter whether you're behind the walls of a private golf club or not. But I absolutely agree with you. This does need to be a situation where everyone ought to step up and have their say.
When are you expecting some clarity then as to what happens next for the NBA? And I presume everybody is still within the bubble, so it should be quite a straightforward situation to get them back playing?
Right. Yeah, they are still within the bubble. If they had left the bubble, that would have started the clock over again. It would be a couple of weeks before they would come back, and that would probably be it. So I would imagine they start back playing tomorrow night. I would imagine they start back in the next couple of days, because they didn't forfeit the games. Obviously, they just postponed them, and they're sort of on a free play now, in the sense that they can, as long as they want to stay in the bubble, they can, and they can work the schedule around. There's not anything that they're missing out on, not any schedule that they have to adhere to. But I would imagine we're going to have some more clarity in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, the Toronto Raptors game against the Celtics tonight has been postponed in the aftermath, but they are saying postseason will resume, so presumably that will be tomorrow evening. Jay, thanks a lot for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Jay Busbee there, senior sports writer with Yahoo Sports. We'll have a lot more on that on OTB AM tomorrow morning. Now, John Giles coming your way in about 10 minutes' time, looking back on all the week's football. But Richie McCormick is with us. Evening, Richie.
Evening, Nathan. How are you?
There's a lot of live sport going on. How are Bulls getting on?
There is not too bad. Not too bad. A 5:30 start to the Europa League first round qualifier in Hungary. It's currently Fehérvár 1, Bohemians 1. They're into stoppage time now in that one. Keith Ward gave Bows a 22nd minute lead this evening, but Nemanja Nikolic equalised from the spot for the hosts 8 minutes before the break. It's remained scoreless in the second half, so 1-1 as they tip towards what will be extra time. At 8 o'clock, Shamrock Rovers welcome the Finns of Ilves to Tallaght Stadium, while Danske Bank Premiership side Glentoran have made the trip over to Scotland to face Motherwell from 7:45.
We're always weighing up. Sorry, I was going to say we're always weighing up the strengths of the other leagues in terms of. I'm sure you've looked into both the strength of Bow's opponents tonight and Shamrock Rovers. Are these games they should be winning?
I think to be honest, to get to extra time, if Bow's doing, and just watching Steve McGuinness pull off a save to make sure that happens, I think getting extra time will be an achievement in and of itself, considering the break that league sides have had here over the past while. They're operating in terms of professionalism. Like, just if you look at the ground that Fehérvár are playing in tonight, like, it's miles and miles above anything that we have here in terms of equivalency. They finished 14 points behind Ferencváros in the Hungarian league last season. Ferencváros dumping Celtic out, if you want to use that as a measure, last night in the Champions League too. They've got 11 or 12 internationals in and around their squads, which gives you a sense of how well put together they've been. Like, this is a step above for Bohemians, and they have been holding their own. Keith Ward missed a chance a few minutes ago to make it 2-1. So to get to extra time, if they manage to pull off a draw of any kind of hue here tonight, or even if it's just a narrow defeat, there would be absolutely no shame in this one. Ilves, to be honest with you, with Shamrock Rovers' opponents tonight, will be a little less familiar, a little less research put into them. But again, any kind of a goal here or there, either side of the ball, will be a decent result for the side. But I think Shamrock Rovers, to be honest, will probably fancy themselves tonight more to get through, given the fact that they have home advantage as well. Yeah, the news round, as always, with thanks to Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. So Matt Doherty, it's pretty much a done deal. Seems to be poised for a £15 million move from Wolves to Tottenham. The fee is believed to be £12 million plus several add-ons. Wolves had initially been looking for a fee closer to £20 million for the 28-year-old Ireland fullback. Bohemians will receive 10% of any fee generated by Doherty's sale after they secured a sell-on clause when he left for Wolves for £75,000 back in 2010. Keith Long, speaking to our own Steve O'Doyle over in Hungary this afternoon, saying that if that money does come through, then it will be spent prudently. I know you were making the comparison with Ben Chilwell going for 50 million, and I know there's an English premium, and that Matt Doherty is 28, but still 12 million. It's a big gap. Seems like one of the bargains, considering Matt Doherty has been one of the best right backs in the Premier League for the last couple of seasons. And listen, Bowes, I'm sure, are going to be delighted with whatever money comes their way. But I'd imagine they probably thought they were going to get almost twice that. Yeah, I'd say they would, but I don't think it would have been a consideration there is to think that they would have received any kind of, I guess, multiple of what may come. I think 1.6 million, if you want to put it in layman's terms, it would be in around, it'd be the equivalent essentially of winning the league here in terms of prize money 5 times over. So that kind of money, all in one bulk, if it does come in one bulk or if it does come in installments, would be great. But as you mentioned there, the disparity in fees, for instance, without wanting to delve into the realm of whataboutery, Doherty's going to be replacing Serge Aurier there. It's very easy to think that Aurier will go for a fee of equivalent, if not more, than what Doherty is arriving for, and he's somebody that Spurs don't want.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be scratching your head trying to work these things out, but 12 million plus seems a bit of a bargain from Spurs' point of view.
Yeah. What else you got for us?
We covered the protest there, as you mentioned, play called off for the day at the Western and Southern Open tennis after Naomi Osaka said she was boycotting her semi-final. But as regards testing here at home, the latest round of PCR coronavirus testing at both Leinster and Ulster has produced 0 positive results. The news has allowed Ulster's senior squad to return to training. Last night, the province confirmed that 8 academy players had tested positive for COVID-19. One senior player was regarded as a close contact to those 8 and is self-isolating even after producing a negative result. Ulster are due to play Leinster at the Aviva Stadium this coming Saturday. Latest round of the FedEx playoffs is underway in Illinois. It's the BMW Championship. Rory McIlroy got his first round underway just before 7 o'clock this evening. He has bogeyed his first hole. He is 1 over par. There is a joint lead on 2 under. Very early days, as we know there at the moment. Harry Higgs through 7, Sebastian Munoz through 4, Tom Hogue through 3, and Tyler Duncan through 2 are all on 2 under par.
All the big names. Great stuff, Richie. Thanks for that. Short and sweet.
Cheers, Nathan.
All right, Richie McCormick there. Coming up after 8 o'clock, we'll talk to Brian O'Driscoll ahead of the weekend's rugby. Graham Potter, the Brighton manager, coming up on the football show. But up next, we're talking football with John Giles.
The News